welcome to another episode of Horror Stories from the Internet. This time we're going to be covering a creepypasta many of you are familiar with. That's right, we're going to be covering the infamous Sonic.exe. But also, I have plans on getting a little bit more experimental in the scripting for this episode and future episodes alike for my Horror Stories of the from the Internet series. This time, for the intro, we'll do a small summary of what happens in the pasta in the intro, along with the normal intro stuff. So there's a small summary and stuff, just for like people who haven't heard of the story and stuff, but want to go into the story themselves blindly and not be spoiled on it with my reading and shit. Though I will say most of you have already know what happens in this infamous creepypasta, but I'm just doing a small summary for you know what. And to mainly test out how the small summary thing will also work in my intro of my script and stuff. So yeah. Here's the summary. The pasta goes as Tom, getting a strange note with a disc in his mail one day while he was playing Sonic Unleashed, from what our main protagonist can recount. With the disc itself being labeled in black marker with the vague program name of Sonic.exe, and recounts on how the strange note Tom had gotten that came with the disc turns out to actually be from his friend Kyle, who Tom has not heard from a while. While Tom begins to have curiosity of what this disc labeled Sonic.exe may contain, despite the strange note they had gotten a warning of or whatever, Tom very much chose to play the disc instead of not playing it and destroying it, like Kyle tried to say to him in said note. As Tom ignores what said note said to them, they begin on checking out what's in this game. So that's the small summary, just a simple gist of what this story may be about and what may happen next, and no spoilers. If you want to just skip to my final thoughts and review and whatnot, and just not spoil the full pasta story for yourself and save it for later for you to read it on your own, you can. Now it's time to check out what this infamous creepypasta, and I have a lot to go over with this pasta. I have a lot of criticisms and other stuff for it, so yeah. So sit back and relax as I read and give some commentary on this creepypasta. I'm a total Sonic the Hedgehog fan, much like everybody else. I like the newer games, but I don't mind playing the classics. I don't think I've ever played glitchy or hacked games before, though I don't think I want to play any after the experience I had. It all started on a nice summer afternoon. I was playing Sonic Unleashed. I like how you get to explore the towns in it, until I noticed, outside my peripheral vision, that the mailman had arrived and put something in my mailbox as usual and left. I paused my game to go see what I got in the mail. The only thing in the mailbox was a CD case for computers and a note. I took it inside. I looked at the note first and realized it was from my dear friend Kyle, let's just call him that, whom I hadn't heard from in 2 weeks. I know that because I recognized his handwriting, though what was weird is how it looked. It looked badly written and scratchy and somewhat difficult to read, as if Kyle was having a hard time writing it down and did it in a hurry. This is what he wrote. Tom, I can't take it anymore. I had to get rid of this thing somehow before it was too late, and I was hoping you'd do it for me. I can't do it. He's after me. If you don't destroy this CD, he'll come after you too. He's too fast for me. Please, Tom, destroy this godforsaken disc before he comes after you too. It's too late for me. Destroy the disc and you destroy him. But do it quick, otherwise he'll catch you. Don't even play the game. It's what he wants. Just destroy it. Please. Kyle. Ah, yes, Kyle's classic glass words in this creepypasta. Well, that was certainly weird. Though, Kyle is my best friend and I haven't seen him in 2 weeks. I didn't do what he asked me. I didn't think that a simple gaming disc would do anything bad to him. After all, it's just a game, right? Boy, was I wrong about that. Anyway, I looked at the disc. It looks like any ordinary computer CDR disc, except it had black marker on it written Sonic.exe, and it was much unlike Kyle's handwriting, meaning that he must have gotten it from someone else, like a pawn shop or eBay. When I saw Sonic on the writing of the CD, I was actually excited and wanted to play it, since I'm a big Sonic fan. I went up to my room and turned on my computer and put the disc in and installed the game. When the title screen popped up, I noticed that it was the first Sonic game. I was like, awesome, because like I said earlier, I like the classics. The first thing I noticed that was out of place was when I pressed start. There was a split second when I saw the title image turned into something much different. Something that I now consider horrifying after cutting to black, before cutting to black. I remember what the image looked like in that split second before the game cut to black. The sky had darkened. The title emblem was rusted and ruined. The Sega's 1991 was now instead Sega 666. And the water had turned red like blood, except it looked hyper-realistic. But the freakiest thing that was in the split-second frame was Sonic. His eyes were pitch black and bleeding, with 2 glowing red dots staring right at me, and his smile had stretched wider up to the edge of his face. I was rather disturbed about that image when I saw it, though I figured that it was just a glitch and forgot about it. After it cut to black, it stayed like that for about 10 seconds or so, and then another weird thing happened. The save file select from SonicTheHedgehog3 popped up, and I was like, what the fuck? What's this doing in the first Sonic game? Anyway, then I noticed something off. The background was the dark cloudy sky of the Bad Stardust Speedway level from Sonic CD, and there were only 3 save files. The music was that creepy Caverns of Winter music from Earthbound, and only it was extended and seemed to have been in reverse. And the image for the save file, where you see a preview of the level you're on, is just red static for all 3 files. Okay, I know this is probably just me, but I remember a different version of this pasta by JC. Was this just a new revision by JC that retcons the original image it uses for the pasta or something like that? What freaked me out more was the character select. It showed only Tails and Knuckles, and to my surprise, Dr. Robotnik. Now I was sure that something was up. I mean, how can you play as Robotnik in a classic Sonic game, for crying out loud? That's when I realized this wasn't a glitchy game. It was a hacked game. Yeah, it definitely looked hacked. It was really creepy, but as a smart gamer, I wasn't scared, or at least I tried not to be. I told myself that it was just a hacked game and there's nothing wrong with that. Anyways, shaking off the creeped out feeling, I picked filed 1 and chose Tails. And when I selected and got started, the game froze for about 5 seconds. I heard a creepy pixelated laugh that sounded an awful lot like that Kefka guy from Final Fantasy before cutting to black. The screen stayed black for about 10 seconds or more. Then it showed the typical level title thing, except the simplistic shapes were different shades of red and the text showed only Hill Act 1. The screen faded in and the level title vanished, revealing Tails in the Green Hill Zone from Sonic 1. The music was different though. It sounded like a peaceful melody in reverse. Anyway, I started playing and had Tails start running like you would in any of the classic Sonic games. What was odd was that as Tails was running along the level, there was nothing but flat grass and a few trees for 5 minutes. That was when the peaceful music started to lower down into slow, deep tones very slowly as I kept going. I suddenly saw something and I stopped to see what it was. It was one of the small animals lying dead on the ground, bleeding. That was when the music started to slow down. Tails had a shocked and saddened look on his face that I never saw him have before. So I had him move along and he kept that worried look on his face. As he kept moving, I saw more dead animals as Tails moved past them, looking more and more worried as the music lowers and he moves past more dead animals. I was shocked to see how they all died. They looked like somebody killed them in rather gruesome ways. A squirrel was hanged on a tree with what appeared to be with his entrails hanging out. A bunny and had all 4 of his limbs torn off, and a duck had his eyes gouged out and his throat slit. I felt sick to my stomach when I saw this massacre, and apparently so did Tails. After a few more seconds, there were more animals and the music seemed to have stopped. I still kept Tails to continue. After a minute passed after the music stopped, Tails was running up a hill and then he stopped. It wasn't until I saw why. Sonic was there on the other side of the screen with his back against Tails with his eyes closed. Tails looked happy to see Sonic, but then his smile faltered, obviously noticing that Sonic wasn't responding to him, if not acting as if he was totally oblivious of Tails' presence. Tails walked slowly towards Sonic, and I noticed that I wasn't even moving my keyboard to make him move, so this had to have been a cutscene. Suddenly I began to have a growing feel of dread as Tails walked closer to Sonic to get his attention. I felt that Tails was in danger and had something bad was going to happen. I heard faint static growing louder and louder as Tails was was but inches away from Sonic and stopped and stuck his head out to touch him. That foreboding feeling in my gut was growing stronger, and I felt the urge to tell Tails to get away from Sonic as the static grew louder. Suddenly, in a split second, I saw Sonic's eyes open, and they were black with those red glowing dots for pupils. Just like that title image, but there wasn't a smile. When that happened, the screen turned black and the standard Sonicexe was off. It stayed black for about 7 seconds, and then white text appeared forming a message saying,
"Hello, do you want to play with me? Hello, do you want to play with me?"
At this point, I was creeped out. I didn't want to continue with the game, but my curiosity got the better of me when I was taken to a different level with the level title now saying, Hide and Seek. This time I was in the Angel Island level from Sonic 3, and it looked like everything was on fire. Tails looked as though he was scared out of his wits this time. He actually looked at me and made frantic gestures to me as if he wanted to get out of the area he was in as fast as possible. I was starting to get freaked out by this. I mean, Tails was actually breaking the fourth wall, trying to tell me to get him out of there. So I pressed down on the arrow keys as hard as I could and made him run as fast as he could. A pixelated version of that creepy theme when you meet Shadow at the Ark as Robotnik from Sonic Adventure 2 was playing, as I made Tails trek through the desolate forest, trying to help him escape from whatever he was trying to run from. Suddenly I heard that creepy laugh again, that awful Kefka laugh. Right after 10 seconds have passed, as I helped Tails run through the forest, and then I started seeing flashes of Sonic popping everywhere on the screen. Again with those black and red eyes. The music changed to the suspenseful drowning jingle as I see Sonic behind Tails slowly gaining up on him, flying. Sonic wasn't running, he was actually flying. The flying pose his sprite was making looked very similar to Metal Sonic's flying pose in Sonic CD, except it was just Sonic and he had the black and red eyes again. Only this time, he had the most deranged looking grin on his face. He looked as though he was enjoying the torment he was giving the poor little fox as he gained up on him. Suddenly, when Tails tripped, another cutscene, the music stopped and Sonic vanished. Tails laid there and started crying for 15 seconds. The scene was rather upsetting to watch, and I kind of teared up myself. But then Sonic appeared right in front of Tails, and Tails looked up in horror. Blood started to come down from those blackened eyes of Sonic's as a grin slowly grew from his face as he looked down at the horrified fox. I could do nothing but watch. Just in a split second, Sonic lunged at Tails right before the screen went black. There was a loud screeching noise that only lasted 5 seconds. The text returned, only this time it said,
"You're too slow. Wanna try again?"
and then that god-awful laugh came with it. I was so shocked by what had happened. Did Sonic murder Tails? No, he couldn't have. He and Tails were supposed to be best friends, right? Why did Sonic do that to him? I shook the shock off as I was brought back to the character select. The save file that had Tails was different. Tails was no longer the box itself. but in the TV screen itself, which was flickering with that red static. Tails' expression scared me. His eyes were black and bleeding. His orange fur had gone black, and he had an expression of anguish on his face. Trying to ignore it, I picked Knuckles next. The laugh came again, and the screen cut to black again. Stayed there for another 10 seconds. This time, the level said, I was really freaked out by now. I couldn't really tell if this was a glitch or a hack or some kind of sick, twisted joke. Or anything really. But despite my fear of what happened next, I kept playing. The next level looked much different. It had the ground of the Scrap Brain Zone, but the sky background looked like the main menu. It had the black, reddish, cloudy sky, but it was the music that creeped me out. But it was the music that creeped me out the most. It sounded like Gygus' theme right after you beat Pokey in Earthbound. I also noticed that Knuckles looked afraid just like Tails did, though not as much. More rather, he looked a little unnerved. He broke the fourth wall just like Tails and looked wasn't sure what was about what was going on. But I made him move anyway. He ran down the straight pathway in this dark level. As he did, the screen started to flicker red static a couple times, and then that maddening laugh came again. Then, after a few seconds of running, I noticed several bloodstains on the metallic ground. I felt a growing sense of fear again, thinking something horrible was going to happen to Knuckles. He looked nauseated, walking down this blood-stained road, but I still kept him going. Suddenly, as Knuckles ran, Sonic appeared right in front of him with those black and red eyes, and then red static appeared again. When the static vanished, showing nothing but a black screen with text saying,
Found you.
I was now scared. Sonic found Knuckles already? What was going on? Anyway, red static came again, and then I was back to the level. Knuckles looked like he was panicking, and Sonic was nowhere to be found. And this time, that high-pitched squealing from the Silent Hill 1's final boss was playing. Was this some kind of boss battle of Sonic? I hope to God it wasn't, honestly. Suddenly Sonic appeared right behind Knuckles in what appeared to be pixelated black smoke. I made Knuckles turn and then punch Sonic, but Sonic vanished in black pixelated smoke before I could even land a hit. That terrible laugh went off again. Then Sonic appeared behind Knuckles again, and then I made him punch him again. And Sonic vanished again, laughing. Knuckles was panicking even more, and even I felt like I was going crazy. Sonic was practically playing with us. He was playing a sick, twisted little mind game with me and Knuckles. Another cutscene played as Knuckles fell to his knees, clutched his head, sobbing. I felt his agony. Sonic was actually driving us both crazy. And then in a split second, Sonic lunged at Knuckles and the screen went black with another distorted screeching noise that lasted for at least 3 seconds. Another text message appeared.
Somebody source play with so little time. Would you agree?
What the hell? Just what is going on? I started to think Sonic was actually trying to talk to me through the game, but I was too scared to think that. I was brought back to the main menu. This time, the second file box had Knuckles in the TV screen. His red fur had darkened to a reddish gray. His dreadlocks were dripping with blood, and his eyes were black and bleeding too. He he looked he had a look of sadness on his face. I began to think those are the actual characters trapped in those TV screens on the save files, but I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. So I shut off the game and took a break. I took a nap, wish I hadn't, cause I then began to have the most disturbing nightmare. I was in pitch black darkness, though I was under the light given off by a lamp that hung high above my head. I could hear the cries of Knuckles and Tails nearby. They were saying stuff like, "Help us," and "Why did you give us to him?" and "Run away before he gets you too." Their cries died out as I then heard Sonic laugh. His laugh, it sounded a lot like the distorted Kefka laugh.
You're a lot of fun to play with, kid. Just make your friend Kyle, so he didn't last long.
I was scared, looking around for the source of the voice.
Won't be long now until you join him and all of my other friends.
I saw him walking forward, flickering in and out in several directions.
You can't run, kid. You're in my world now. Just like the others.
When he grabbed me, I saw his bleeding black and red-eyed, grinning face. I woke up with a fright. After a couple of hours, I decided to continue playing the game. I don't know why, but I had to know. I had to figure out why this was happening. So I turned on the computer, turned on the game, and selected Robotnik next. I still thought that was wacky playing as Robotnik, but anyway, the level title appeared again, and this time it said ... which I found really freaky. This time, I was in some kind of hallway. Didn't really look like it was from any of the classic Sonic games, though it has the pixelated style. The floor was shiny and checkered. The walls were a dark grayish purple with animated candle lights and a few dark bloodstains here and there. And there was a dark red curtain hanging above on the top part of the screen. Every 12 seconds or so, that red curtain sways very slowly, but whenever you're playing the game, you can barely see it move. The music was oddly pleasant, a piano playing a rather sad yet peaceful song, but I knew better. This was the song that played in Hill Act 1, only it wasn't in reversed. Robotnik didn't look entirely nervous like Tails and Knuckles did, but he did have a suspicious look on his face, as if he was just a bit paranoid. He did a little animation when I just left him standing. He turns his head to the left and then to the right at least twice, and then shrugs at me, as if he has no idea where he was or what was going on. Even though I was scared out of my mind about what was going to happen, I had Robotnik continue onward. He did his usual running animation, you know, when you've beaten him at the end of a classic Sonic game and you chase him. As we continued going through the hallway. Then I stopped at a long flight of stairs leading downward. Now I was nervous. Even Robotnik seemed unsure of himself, though I pressed onward. As I led Robotnik down the stairs, I noticed that the walls have gotten darker and more reddish. The red torches are now an eerie blue. Then we landed onto another hallway, and this time was no longer the last. And this one was longer than the last one, or at least it felt like it. And then we headed down another flight of stairs down. This one was much longer, at least 1 full minute. And then I heard that horrid Kefka laugh again, and then the music slowly faded until it was quiet. As it did, the walls turned more dark red and the torches were a black flame now. When Robotnik landed onto the third hallway, I noticed he now looked really creeped out. Though he tried to hide it, I couldn't blame him. He was scared too. Suddenly, Sonic popped right in front of Robotnik, the same way he did Knuckles and then Red Static. The Red Static lasted for 15 seconds, and then it showed me a most unpleasant image. The image showed a hyper-realistic Sonic standing in the darkness where you can only see his face while his head and torso faded into black. And when I say hyper-realistic, I mean like he looked so real. You actually see the lines in his blue fur, as you could actually feel the fur if you touch the screen. His face, oh god, he had the most horrifying smile I had ever seen. And that's saying something, considering I saw that image at the start of the game. His eyes are wide and black, and once again crying blood, which also looked hyper-realistic. And there were 2 small glowing red dots in those black eyes, staring right at me, as if staring into my mind. His grin was wide and demonic. It literally stretched to the sides of his face like a Cheshire cat, except Sonic had fangs. Very sharp fangs. Much like the werehog's teeth, except more vicious looking. Somewhat yellowish, and from the look of it, he had stains of blood and small bits of flesh on his lips and fangs, as if he ate some animal. I stared at the gruesome image for a good 30 seconds, never taking my eyes off of it. I felt as if he was actually looking at me, smiling at me. That face, it just took 10 seconds for it to etch itself into my brain for good. Then the screen flickered with red static again 3 times, and on the 3rd time I heard the Kefka laugh, except this time it sounded distorted, demonic even. It went back to the image again, except this time there was text again, though it was messed up. But it was pretty much one of the most horrifying things I looked at since I had this game.
I am God.
It was when I read that message while looking at Sonic when it hit me. I realized right there and then, this Sonic was a monster. A pure evil, sadistic, all-powerful, nightmarish, demented monster. All of his victims, including Tails, Knuckles, Robotnik, and possibly Kyle, are just his little toys. The game is the very gateway into his chaotic, nightmarish world, and the very hell that his victims are trapped in. Suddenly, in a actual split second, I screamed as Sonic lunged at the screen, screeching loudly with his mouth wide open to a unnatural length, revealing nothing but a literally spiraling abyss of pure darkness. But before this red static came again, this time much louder and distorted, so loud that it hurt my eyes. I yelled and grabbed my ears as the red static screeched for a good 7 seconds. Then it stopped and showed nothing but black screen. As I sat there staring at the black screen, one last text came up. The Kefka laugh, now sounding more clear as if Sonic was right behind me, played again 3 times as I looked at the text in shock and confusion. Then I got booted back to the main menu. This time the third save file had a TV screen of Robotnik in the same tormented state as Tails and Knuckles. Robotnik's skin turned a dull gray. His mustache drooped and had blackened. His glasses broke and blood is coming from them. He had a mere dread-like expression on his face. I looked at Tails, Knuckles, and Robotnik, and I cried a bit. I pitied them for the agony they're going through. They were forever trapped within the game, forever tormented by that horrid hedgehog, and always will be. Then the computer itself shut off. I couldn't turn it back on, no matter what I did. I sat there for maybe 25 seconds, horrified by what just happened. Sonic is the very embodiment of evil. He tortures people who play this game in more ways than one, and then when he gets bored, he drags you into the game, literally drags you to hell, where he can play with you always as his toy. I can't get the game out of my computer. I think it's stuck in there, but at least I managed to turn it back on now. After I sat there for 25 seconds, I heard a voice right behind me like a whisper. I turned around to see where the voice came from, and what I saw made me scream. Sitting on my bed, staring right at me, was a Sonic plushie smiling with red blood stains under its eyes. Alright, so that was the infamous Sonic.exe. So, like I said earlier in this video's intro, I have a lot to discuss and criticize with what I think about this creepypasta. And I am being honest here, and I know it's not unpopular to hate on this story, like some people in the creepypasta community, like the people from Bad Creepypasta, Hoodoo Hoodlum's Revenge, and etc. Or in some cases, from what I can see from a few other new creepypasta reviewers and narrators, like the Dark Author and the Shadow Reader and etc. It's also not unpopular for a kind of big new minority to kind of like this story either. But I will have to say, for what I think of this story, honestly, I consider myself to be another person who hates the story, and honestly, you can see why. There are many things bad, and I have many problems with this pasta. I am really confused why the writer, aka you-know-who, thought it was a good idea for Tom to think that this Sonic.exe program game was some sort of hacked game, or sometimes at first a glitched one, at least too. I mean, seriously, from the start, Tom got like a strange disc just labeled Sonic.exe while he was thinking his friend Kyle was possibly playing a prank on him. Wouldn't he at least expect the disc to either be just some sort of disc filled with a filled but a TXT file, like you got pranked or something, or if there was a program called Sonic.exe in the disc, I believe he would have thought the disc contained a fan-made game made by his friend Kyle to prank them or something or whatever. Sorry about getting a bit off track, but I don't like the idea of Tom thinking the Sonic.exe game was a hacked PC port of the original Sonic the Hedgehog 1 game or a glitched version of it. Because in my opinion, there are so many things about the game that show it is not a hacked game, nor is a glitched one. Rather, a game that was completely made on its own through like something like Game Maker or whatever. Like, if it was some sort of weird Sonic fan game, like as if it was some sort of weird Sonic fan game that was just simply titled Sonic.exe. Anyways, while I do hate this pasta and its creator, JC, that fucking pedophile, I will say it has some pretty cool concepts. And how it's about a anomalous spooky game program disguised as a Sonic fan game of some sorts for the PC, or a Sonic fan-made PC port, but in actuality is a weird anomalous game containing a cosmic horror of some sorts in said game, in quotes. As for the rest of the story, it contains many cliches but that was to be expected due to the fact that the pasta was made back in the day where cliches weren't very frowned upon in the community, and the community had slightly lesser cliches for creepypastas than nowadays, I assume. Or actually, I think it was more so the community back in the day didn't have that very much, like, really overly annoyed standards when it comes to like cliches and stuff, when so many people would like get so easily annoyed by like cliches being in certain pastas. Honestly, I don't get annoyed easily. It's to be expected when you read some creepypastas or internet horror stories that people make on the internet, because some people will wind up doing the mistake of adding cliches to the pasta or something like that, or maybe they're like too new to writing or something like that. But yeah, as for the pacing, there really was not much pacing in this pasta for me to enjoy. It sort of uses many cliches in order to add up to scare factor, and overall the antagonist X, or Sonic.exe as most people call him, is a cool idea of a cosmic horror-like entity or weird paranormal entity that pretends like it's a satanic demon, but turns out to be so much worse than what the main character and the reader expects. I wished it was executed a whole lot more better, but speaking of which, I do know that many people have made many rewrites of the original Sonic.exe creepypasta, and I will say I'll check out those rewrites and spin pastas similar to that of like Shay Grell's Anti-Sonic.dll, a Sonic.exe spin pasta I have covered here already on this Creepypasta review series before I covered the original Sonic.exe here right now. As for grammar and formatting, there are a few grammatical issues, on the pasta, but not that very many. But yeah. And the formatting, I will have to say, is kind of fine. I'll give this pasta that, but for the overall story, it's pretty bad. Like, pretty bad in my honest opinion, and honestly, just pretty bad, honestly. It had some cool concepts, but overall, the story is pretty bad. It would have been a lot more better if its concepts and cliches were executed a lot more better and things were kept a little bit more subtle and have some build up to it, to what was going on in the game, instead of no build up at all. But anyways, What do you all think of this old classic of a pasta that aged horribly? For me, I don't like this pasta at all. What would you think would make it better? Also, if you have any pastas you want to suggest to me to check out, tell me in the comments below. If you have a creepypasta of your own you want to share and share it to my forum site and stuff. This is Wonder Hellblazer, and I give this pasta a 3 out of 10. And that is all for this video and this creepypasta.